Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So, if you see yesterday's newspaper, there's an article about fishermen being killed in Gujarat firing, hog firing in Gujarat area. So we have seen some issues between India and Sri Lanka also, India and Gujarat also. In the same way, can we link it to internal security or between India and Pakistan relations, India Sri Lanka relations? See, the thing is, it's not something new. Whatever we are seeing between India and Sri Lanka or India and Pakistan, it's not new. India has arrested multiple fishermen belonging to Pakistan, and Pakistan have arrested multiple Indian fishermen, and they used to languish in the jails. So whenever there is some goodwill meet between India and Pakistan, they used to release these fishermen as a goodwill gesture. So that is how things used to happen, because there is no clear-cut demarcation. There is no clear-cut demarcation, and it's a very subjective term. And because of poverty, lack of awareness, or need for howling more, these fishermen take the risk and enter territorial Pakistan. So unfortunate event is he was being killed. Okay, normally if he was arrested, probably diplomacy would have worked. We would have gotten him back. But now the things have escalated. So that's one thing you have to notice. That continuous diplomatic efforts have to be invested by the governments in this particular area. And after 26/11, there is a suspicion. 26/11, all those 11 people came into India using a small boat. Okay, so we didn't have proper patrolling system, proper mechanism. Then there were some suggestions like there is a suspicion drug smuggling and all these things also happen because of these boats. So there is always a trust deficit between both these countries, and Pakistan tries to leverage every opportunity that it can get on India. So that's the only major takeaway. No long-term ramifications. But whereas it comes to this, I think this is a main direct question. What are urban floods? What are the steps to be taken to solve the menace? And it's not limited to Chennai. If you have seen the images in different media or papers, Chennai airport is under water, Chennai roads are underwater, a lot of beaches are underwater, right? There is a huge amount of influx of flood water. So Chennai people have more or less come to, life in Chennai has more or less come to standstill. So what are the solutions for this kind of problems? Is it limited only to Chennai? We have seen the same in Mumbai. We have seen the same in Hyderabad, Bengaluru, yes, Pune, even Vadodara. Cities like Vadodara also have been victims of urban flooding. So why urban flooding is a common phenomenon nowadays? Enrichment of wetlands. Yes. So again, we can start with the basic geographical phenomena, like that is excess rainfall. Thanks to climate change, erratic monsoon is a common thing. Monsoon's predictability or the stability of monsoon has changed. So that can be one reason. Drainage systems, again, wetlands. Sorry, rapid urbanization. Unplanned or rapid urbanization can be one thing. Yes, lack of coordination between the various municipal authorities is one more thing. Clogging of drainages, waste management. But cities like I-flows, see, Chennai also have this flood management system. Mumbai have flood management system. In spite of all these things, flood is still a common phenomenon. National Disaster Management Authority have released multiple rules or regulations on how to mitigate the urban flooding system. But all these things are not working, not being properly implemented, and they are not working. Why?
One thing is lack of political will.
You can also blame the vagaries of monsoon, right? If you see the first paragraph, the expected rainfall is very high. All your drainages and all these things are developed for a certain amount of flooding, certain amount of planning. But as you have mentioned, unplanned urbanization, we have already narrowed the drainage systems. Apart from this, there is excess or surplus rainfall. This is something that we cannot control. So what can we control?
Better drainage systems.
Better drainage systems and better absorption capacity of the cities. But again, there will be a saturation point. So every ministry in Tamil Nadu or in the national level also have to have this convergence, whether it's municipality, agriculture ministry, roads, Jal Shakti ministry, everybody has to come together and they have to plan and invest in the long run. Yes, you have to rehabilitate some people if need be. Unless and until you take the long-term measures, this is going to be a repeated discussion for phenomena, repeated discussion for multiple years, for years together, and still we cannot solve the urban flooding problem. Again, no need to worry about, because 1 or 2 weeks we will forget. So no, just like the Diwali incident, we won't talk about air pollution till next Diwali. Yes or no? See, one good thing about the BJP government is they identify people from all walks of the life and they are recognizing them through various awards. From last year onwards, automatically we'll focus on awards for prelims also. We never used to read prelims, sports and awards for prelims. Now, unfortunately, you people have to read. Okay, so who is he? Abdul Jabbar. So he's a person who used to battle for this 1984 Bhopal victims. I have shared some names in the morning, Parivartana also, like a street vendor who saved money and gave it for welfare of the education. A person who used to burn the unclaimed bodies. Yes, a old woman who planted a lot of trees. Like this, the good thing about BJP is they have identified a lot of people and they have given good awards. That's a recognition for the hard work. So you don't have to be a big shot or a big name in the society to do good. All you need is a goodwill. All these are very good examples for essays and ethics and GS answer writing also. Okay, yeah, it's as objective as that. I'm not asking you, I'm not hoping you to become a social reformer like them, right? Yes, if you have that heart, yeah, probably you can do much more by getting into civil services. Yes or no? If these people can do this much as a normal individuals, think of the things you can achieve as a bureaucrat. Okay, so that's one more thing. Really interesting. A new jurisprudence for political prisoners. So the two case names are very important. I think they are worth repeating in your GS paper too, even for mains this time. There are some valuations. What is the first and most important thing of criminal jurisprudence in India? What is jurisprudence? Hmm. What is prudence? What is the meaning of the word prudence? Mhm.
New legal, I mean, jurisprudence can be a legal approach.
Do you remember that rule of law, Article 14, polity? Or what are the two major themes of Article 14? Equality before law and equal protection of law. So how are they different from each other? Equals should be treated equally. The interpretation of that particular theme. In the same way, normally judiciary will interpret a particular law or an act, right? And that interpretation is more or less applied. It's like constitutionalism. Constitution is theory, constitutionalism is practice. In the same way, law, which has been interpreted by judiciary in a particular term, is more or less implemented. Normally, if you see in the society, what is the maxim that goes for judiciary or criminal justice system? You are innocent until proven otherwise. Okay, you are innocent until proven otherwise. That means you are given that benefit of doubt. Okay, you are given that benefit of doubt. Even if you are accused, you are considered as innocent. You are innocent until how? Proved otherwise. That means proved till guilty. Now, what do this draconian National Security Act, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act and other security acts they take the basic measurement as you are guilty, okay, and you have to prove it. And the onus is on the accused. Normally, the onus is on the system. The system has to prove that someone is a criminal. That is why police officers go for torture and all these things, right? Why? It's the responsibility of the police public prosecutor to prove that he or she is a criminal. Whereas in Unlawful Activities and Prevention Act, the system takes you as a guilty and it presumes you as a guilty person. Okay, so that is why they deny the bail. Normally, whenever you see a National Security Act or some draconian law is applied, the bail is not a norm. Bail is an exemption. Why? We have to think from multiple people point of view. First, here is, normally speaking, in this present case, Sudha Bharadwaj or these three students, or there are a lot of people who are being victimized by the system. Okay, that is why we are thinking that these are draconian laws. Let's imagine a hypothetical scenario. You are a student leader. Okay, you are radicalized. I don't know how radicalized you are. On a prima facie, and by the looks of it, you look like you are not radicalized. But you can be a head of a sleeper cell. You can be the head of a sleeper cell. How do I activate sleeper cells? Okay, what is sleeper cells? Okay, sleeper cell is a network of terrorists. Okay, you are radicalized in, let's say, in Bengaluru. He is radicalized in Hyderabad. All of you are radicalized by me. Okay, you are ready to do anything for me, but you don't know who I am. Okay, you are dormant. Then I will come and send a message. Today is the D-Day. Then you will go to undo something radical in the Bengaluru, or he will do something radical in Hyderabad. So who told you to do that? I did. So sleeper cells means radicalized youth under the wing of a leader. Okay, it's a terrorist. It's a terror-related term. The simple thing being, all of you are radicalized. All of you have normal lives. All of you are waiting for my orders or something. Now, for a normal person, if you are released on a bail, you may not be able to tamper the evidence. You may not be able to do something radical. Okay, but let's imagine the head of a sleeper cell is released. All he has to do is get a cell phone somewhere and send a SMS to that particular group, and the groups are activated. Yes or no? It's as easy as that for me to start the chain effect. Okay, then you will start acquiring the bomb. You will bomb blast after 6 months. Okay, but how did it all start? With my simple instruction. So if I give you the bail, okay, haven't I creating my own problems in 6 months down the line? Yes. So this is how the security systems thinks about the things. They are very skeptical about giving bail to anyone who is accused of these radical things. That means by default, they might have a suspicion. They might have a hunch. They may not be able to prove it. Okay, so that's the core reason why all this act has such stringent measures. That means you can be arrested for 180 days without filing a charge sheet, without producing you to the magistrate. In 6 months, I will break you mentally. Then you might confess. A lot of things can happen. I might have advantages. No, this is all theory. Purely national security point of view, such laws are needed for the country. Okay, when in extreme situations and when whomever I'm arresting is beyond doubt in my mind. The opposite is bad. Why opposite is bad? Everybody who has some animosity towards the present government, I will apply these draconian laws and throw them in the jail. For example, the Pinjra Tod activists. Okay, they were raising slogans. Okay, this Bhim Koregaon activists were rising for Dalit assertion. Okay, these three students who were associated with some radical literature, they were also labeled as terrorists. In this way, if you keep throwing everybody in the jail in the name of national security, okay, the entire purpose of the national security acts are getting diluted actually. Yes. That's the major thing we have to understand here. Okay, so I'm telling you the story from both the sides. In reality, we are definitely abusing it. And remember, after 2014, BJP has not passed a single act which gave it more powers or more draconian powers. All the laws which the present government is using are laws created during Congress time. So all political parties are same in relation to these kind of laws. Okay, it's only the implementation that will change. It's not like only Modi is using, or Rahul Gandhi won't use, or Mamata Banerjee won't use. Every state, everybody is using their own draconian laws in their own favor. So the ultimate objective is draconian laws should have high entry barrier. That means to apply draconian laws, you need to have a foolproof mechanism. So that is what is changing in this particular case. What is the case? Tawa Fasal versus Union of India. This is the most latest judgment given by the Supreme Court in relation to the association. So Supreme Court is saying just because somebody is associated with a terrorist organization does not make him a terrorist. He is not sufficient to attract offenses alleged. That means I don't deserve UAPA or some stringent norm. Maybe you might put me under terror watch list or something, but it doesn't deserve me to be incarcerated for years together. Next one is mere possession of documents or books does not make me a terrorist. Yes or no? I can have all the Naxal books in my home. I may not be a Naxalite. Yes, this is not something new. Few years ago also Supreme Court gave a similar judgment to Naxalites. Just because someone is carrying Naxal related books does not make them a Naxalite. So just because you are associated with a terrorist organization does not make you a terrorist. But think from a police officer point of view. How does that sound?
Suspicious.
Which one? Which movie? Sanjay Dutt example. Acha. Okay. He had a he had a gun. So there are a lot of things. I think there is more to that story than mere possession of gun, right? I think he was associated with some band outfits. So that is the whole story as far as I think. Okay. But here, coming back to the discussion, as a police officer, what is your thought process? Do you agree with that statement? Mere association with a terrorist organization does not attract offenses. Separation of investigation and law and order. Again, see, it doesn't matter which wing you are here. The essence is what? How do you convince a police officer? Should a police officer wait for you to commit a crime? Should a police officer wait for you to convert your mind from associated to official member? Yes. Should he wait? But that is technically true, right? He has to wait. So how do you deal with that such kind of scenarios?
Put them under watch list.
Again, that is what USA is doing. Is it working for USA? See, the net only gets bigger, right? I hope you understand. You have a lot of members under watch list. You don't know whom to focus on. That is exactly what is happening to US and other countries, right? So all these are practical problems. Sorry, by tapping phones. Yes, all these things are done. Spider. That's called as PRISM program. That's USS PRISM program. That is lifted. Spider movie. The ancient scenes are lifted from the series called as Person of Interest. So basically, it's a PRISM program. But the problem is, if I tap every phone, every call, every SMS, I don't know whom to focus upon. Okay, that is also a real life scenario. Now, coming back purely from the constitutional point of view, it's a progressive judgment, no doubt about it. Why? Now, the burden is on the executive. Executive has to continue doing what he has to do, and at the same time, he should not let the courts dilute the provisions. So, what should they do? They should apply UAPA only in cases where even prima facie material is very severe. Yes or no? Or they have to invest in intelligence gathering, technology plus hybrid. The most efficient way of gathering information is grassroots level network. The best police officers are the officers with the most network. Okay, so the executive has to have more investments, and above all, who should have some shame? Political masters. Yes or no? See, if you talk to honestly personal level, 99.9% of a police officers can tell you who is a terrorist, who is an innocent, just by talking to that particular person. The police are so used to that particular environment, they actually know who is lying, who is saying the truth. But because of these political pressures, all these things are happening. If there is no political pressures, the police officers will actually perform their duty. Then Supreme Court does not have an opportunity to come and dilute these kind of national security laws. So everything is interlinked. The politicians have to change. The executive should be having more freedom. Precasing judgment and other things have to be implemented. Right? Yes. No, I don't think so. Because they take national security very seriously. Hmm. But if you see the number of terrorist attacks that happened after 2011 in USA, you can count them on fingers. I think there was this cooker bomb case. That's a major terror act after 2011. A bomb in a cooker, right? That's the only thing. The rest of the things were more or less stopped. Many people were arrested. I cannot recall. See, gun violence is one thing. They are killing themselves. That's a whole different drama. But for terrorist-related crimes, I don't think USA was in the news. Am I missing any case? No, right? So here again, it's not the see here we are discussing everything in one article because I want to discuss about terrorists. There are genuine threats to India. We need some laws. Okay, nobody can say who is innocent until the last minute. I might be the best actor in the world, right? I might wait for 10 years. I might come out saying, I'm not guilty. Then I might continue terrorist activities. So that is also threat to the society. At the same time, no innocent should be punished. It should not be made into a political tool. It's like this, story, right? If you keep telling everything is national security, national security, national security for everything, one day when there is a genuine national security, nobody will trust you. So national security should not be politicized. So that's also one thing. And above all, fundamental rights are sacrosanct. In the tug of war between the political masters, fundamental rights should not be sacrificed. So these are the major themes we have to remember in the particular article. Again, that is what I'm saying. If you focus on national security, we will definitely improve. What is real national security issue? Let's say terrorists in Jammu and Kashmir, radicalization of youth in Jammu and Kashmir, border issue at Bangladesh, Pakistan. These are national security issue. Smuggling weapons to Mumbai, that is national security. A youth contesting JNU elections is not national security. Yes or no? A group of people having a different political ideology than yours is not a national security. I hope you understand. So everybody with a radical idea cannot be. See, in anger, people will shout, right? If I get a chance, I will kill him. If you see TV debates, opposition leaders shout in the same way. Can we say all of them are anti-nationals? It's not a crime to think that I want to kill you. Even reading a book, How to Kill You, is not also a crime. Only when I buy a knife and then I come near you, then that is a crime. Yes. So we need to have that. That is how law works, right? That is how. That is a problem with terrorism. Okay. So one more interesting term is we have seen judicial overreach, judicial activism, judicial evasion, judicial adventurism, and now judicial radicalism. Again, I think it will be again case by case basis. You should always be pragmatic, right? You should always be pragmatic. You have to believe there are genuine threats. See, just because I encourage fundamental rights are sacrosanct, I am also not that innocent to believe that there are no terrorists. Country needs to carry a stick and at the same time a velvet glove. Both are equally important. I need to take care of the people who I need to take care. I need to be strict on the people who I should be strict on. So I will fight tooth and nail for the fundamental rights of everyone. But at the same time, my sole intention is also to protect the country. So the dilution of national security in the name of politicization is also equally a wrong thing. That should also be discussed. But the country unfortunately is not discussing that particular aspect. How politicians are damaging the national security laws. That is also something that has to be discussed. And other things like if somebody is proved innocent after 10 years of incarceration, such a heavy fine should be placed on all the people involved. Or the state should pay, let's say 3 crores per annum. For every year that he was put in the jail, state should pay 3 crore rupees to that individual. Then he was in the jail for 10 years. He should be paid 30 crores. So such kind of stringent reforms have to be brought in so that we won't use all these laws very easily, just like that. There are other laws. If you don't like him, you want to put him in jail, you can make his life difficult in other ways also. Okay. AUKUS could rock China's boat in Indo-Pacific. Will it? What is the heading? While there is nothing surprising about AUKUS, a Pacific-centric orientation has advantage in the context of China. So, what is the most latest news in relation to this AUKUS thing? Who's bottle? Faculty. Okay. What is the outcome of AUKUS?
One is this transmission, sharing of nuclear powered submarines.
That is AUKUS. What is the outcome of AUKUS? What happened after AUKUS was announced?
With regard to China or
Overall context.
overall context,
France and India. Okay.
and like because even in the G20 and the climate change summit, the US tried to pacify France.
Okay. Taiwan issue.
Yes, China's
See, did AUKUS accelerate the issue between China and Taiwan?
yes, sir, because US is does not recognize.
Did Joe Biden make a statement saying that we will come to aid of Taiwan if Taiwan needs our help?
Yes,
Okay.
he made a statement.
So, isn't Taiwan becoming a new flashpoint between China and US after AUKUS? Okay. So, what is the summary or what is the most important thing he's trying to bring? He's trying to say that Indo-Pacific is the core focus of Quad. Okay, Indo-Pacific more or less domination is by Indian Ocean or Indian Ocean regions. Whereas now AUKUS will extend the scope of Pacific. So AUKUS plus Quad is like completing the Indo-Pacific scenario. AUKUS plus Quad is covering the entire Indo-Pacific scenario, and that will have less and less scope for China to come into the Indo-Pacific region to dominate. That's one thing, right? But is it actually going to make a difference in China's plans for the world? Do you think China will be slowed down because of the AUKUS, or they will have more motivation to make new allies or expand in other places?
The latter is true.
So see, this article is more like a revisionist history. He is saying that Australia, UK, and US were always a alliance. Okay, because of World War II, continuation of World War policies, Australia, UK, and US were always alliances. Okay, now they have explicitly mentioned that I'm joining a nuclear or a military doctrine. That's the only difference between earlier AUKUS and new one. That was informal. This one is formal. Second thing, is India willing to take nuclear weapons, take the position that Australia took? will India officially accept nuclear submarines from USA or make Quad into a military alliance openly? Do you think that India will accept that position?
No, sir.
No. Why? It will be like India joining the Western Bloc officially. Right now, China is accusing that India is joining the Western Bloc. Okay, but India is saying we don't belong to any bloc. We are friends of all. Strategic autonomy. If Quad is made into a military doctrine or anything like that, more or less you are like a member of the Western Bloc. So that is something that India does not want to happen. So Australia was in the same position like India. Australia was accepting the China's domination more or less silently. And China abused that superpower or capacity. Then what happened? Australia got fed up with the Chinese domination.
policies.
Finally, it has decided to explicitly oppose the Chinese
policies.
aggression or Chinese policy. That is the major difference that has happened. Now, will it convert into something concrete to control China? See, he is discussing on the areas of convergence in this particular paragraph. If you see this particular paragraph, he's saying what are the areas of convergence between Europe, UK, and Australia. How they can come together and make some difference. Build back better, Blue Dot Network, or artificial intelligence, supply chain resilience. A lot of repeated keywords are there. But the summary is it actually going to make any difference?
As you said, it will accelerate the Chinese will to dominate the world further.
Mm-hmm. Will it act as a deterrent?
I believe that would give rise to China's growth in some other direction,
Mm-hmm.
like expansion of its trade
No.
and capital in Africa and South America.
Again, we have our own alternatives, but think about it. The questions can be like this: has AUKUS overshadowed Quad? Critically analyze. Is AUKUS the only protection for Indo-Pacific? Okay, what is the major difference between AUKUS and Quad?
GS2.
Yeah, they have already, right? If you see the previous questions in IR also, the questions are like this: is Quad being overshadowed by AUKUS? Do you think so?
No, sir. While the
Tell
very
me one logical outcome of Quad in security terms.
as far as security is concerned, they remain silent.
But we have military exercises in the name of Quad. Malabar exercise and all these exercises are done in the Indo-Pacific region only, right?
That is more or like balancing
See,
the power.
we have to look at this from multiple perspectives. First one is AUKUS, Quad, and the European Union. Okay, Europe does not have a direct, interest or involvement in Indo-Pacific. Okay, they want to keep it open. That probably America is using its help, Australia's help to control the Chinese sphere. There is officially a nuclear weapon means China won't send the any expansionist policies. At the same time, Quad is there. Quad is more or less like a dummy. That means it's there, it's not doing anything. At the same time, it is in theory doing a lot of things. Quad is doing a lot of things in theory. Now, the question is, let's assume we have dominated the Indo-Pacific region. Let's assume we have dominated the Indo-Pacific region. Where do I trade? Or whom do I trade with? ASEAN countries. That is also one thing we have to understand. Who is dominating the trade with ASEAN countries? China is dominating the trade with ASEAN countries. So as long as we are saying that Quad will add an extra layer, or AUKUS will add a more strength to Quad, we are also ignoring the bilateral trade that India do not have with any of these countries. Okay, so see, again, this exam is UPSC, right? Indian exam. I have to look at everything from Indian perspective. What is India getting in the long run deal? So tomorrow, if US can, just say Quad is okay, just a formality. BRICS is there, Quad is also there, Shanghai Cooperation is also there. So India is member of multiple groupings. Quad is one more grouping. Are we actually leveraging anything? No, right? So that is one more thing we have to see. So again, as I keep saying, when all this still confusion is there, nobody is having a clarity on what actually anything is achieving, and we are assuming China is not doing anything because of Quad or AUKUS or something else. China might not be interested in doing anything. China wants to strengthen its own place first. Okay, it has dominated South China Sea. It is dominating its own interests. It is investing in algorithms. It is investing in quantum computing. It is setting its house in order. Okay, maybe then they want to expand. Okay, all this is purely hypotheticals. And of course, Australia is not going to have a submarine for next 20 years or 8 years, right? So it's only all in theory, right? So in the long run, in this gap, what is India doing? How is Atmanirbhar Bharat about to happen? That should be the core focus. So if there is ever a question like is Quad overshadowed by AUKUS and all those things, I will write a balanced answer saying AUKUS is a complement to Quad rather than a overshadow to Quad. But again, the summary is India has to leverage its own strength in the gap. Before we all reach some kind of clarity, before all of us come to a clarity that Quad is a failure or AUKUS is a success or whatever, India has to leverage the Atmanirbhar Bharat. Clear? That's a major thing you need to understand. We don't need the history of UK, US, and all these countries. Right?
How do we start with that? For example, did AUKUS overshadowed Quad?
So then we will start with what is AUKUS, what is Quad, what are the objectives of AUKUS, what are the objectives of Quad, which one is military, which one is not, what is ultimate objective of both. Both of them will say free open trade and rule-based international order. Nobody is saying to dominate China. So we want a free open trade and rule-based international order. What? It's like a highway. Indo-Pacific is a highway. I can come and go as I please. Even China is welcome as long as it follows rule-based international order. That is theory, right? Now, if in 2024, if Donald Trump becomes president again, things might change very drastically for the planet. Will he?
Oh, no, sir.
He should. We should have some entertainment in the world. The world is very boring without Trump. Sorry?
He opened his
Truth social media. Yes. Irony. Truth must have committed suicide, right? So again, this is about Tigray region. Prelims question, not needed for mains. But summary is this. First of all, don't give Nobel Prizes too early. Okay. Point number 2. Last time she mentioned a question, right? Why is African countries not settled, or why do there is a continuous tension between African regions? So again, as I told you, it's all about ethnicity. It's all about literacy, awareness generation. It's how you deal with the interest issue in the long run. See, this is an opportunity for us to learn the leadership style of various people. If you take Abraham Lincoln, Gandhi, or Nelson Mandela from Africa itself. Yeah. So their solutions are always for long term. You have to have that empathy, compassion for the others. As long as you entertain the fault lines. See, this is a lesson for India also, right? The more fault lines you have, the harder it will to bring peace. If you see the Tigray region, Tigray, Eritrea, okay, then Ethiopia. Ethiopia is here, Tigray region, Eritrea. So Tigray and Eritrea used to have a fighting, right? Then Ethiopia and Tigray became one. Then, this is Tigray, right? Ethiopia and Eritrea, they joined hands to control Tigray. Enemies became friends. Then again, now friends became enemies. Tigray and Ethiopia are having their own fight. Okay, like this, the drama, as long as you have different fault lines within one Ethiopia and surrounding nations. Now, what happened? If you see Ethiopia, it is made of small groupings. Okay, all of them started fighting, and they started fighting with the neighbors. So it's like, imagine India map. Tamil Nadu is fighting with Kerala. Kerala started fighting with Maharashtra. Maharashtra started fighting with someone else. Like this, everybody started fighting with everyone. Then I started fighting with Bangladesh. It only started escalating. That means old fault lines which were buried are now brought up, because you are my friends. Okay, when you are in trouble, I will come to your rescue and I will become the enemy of everyone. So like this, all the old fault lines started coming into the forefront. So what is the long-term solution? Will Gandhian techniques work? Will Mandela techniques work? Asymmetrical federalism. So he was not ready to believe the asymmetrical federalism, right? That means he was not willing to believe that, the small pockets of rebels, if given electoral power, will actually stay with the rest of the party. That is something in doubt. Okay. Again, as I told you, South Africa should also have had similar problems. How did South Africa heal itself? A good leader, right? He had this compassionate heart to understand the problems, though deeply rooted, historically baggaged. Okay. A few weeks ago, also, if you have seen, Quentin de Kock, he refused to take a knee. Yes, that became a racial issue. So racism did not go away from South Africa. It is still there. He apologized later. Racism is throughout the world. The fault lines will not permanently be erased, but fault lines should not deepen further. And that can be done only by leader. Society cannot heal itself. You take any major story in the world, it is always the leader who has healed the fault lines. It's always the leader's role to start healing the fault lines. Then things will start slowly healing. There will always be someone who wants to keep continuing. There should be a person who should solve the wounds. So this kind of long-term leadership is not happening in the world. And next, what about UNSC? What is UN Security Council doing? Where are the world superpowers? Why is nobody discussing about Ethiopia? Why is nobody bringing sanctions against Ethiopia or Yemen or Myanmar? What is the world collectively doing? That means every man for himself. Americans are happy with their own problems. Nobody is bothered about Yemen or Syria or Ethiopia. So collectively, we don't have a global leadership. There is no leadership whatsoever. Yes. And remember, things cannot survive on its own. If there is really a pressure at global level or at regional level also, things will calm down. As long as you give free hand, the leader will try to make the most out of it.
R2P in only economically viable situations. What is that?
Responsibility to protect. Who said that? Okay. So basically, R2P means responsibility to protect. Yeah, technically, normally we use it for this hot pursuit surgical strikes in that terminology. That means it's the responsibility of the particular country to protect its own citizens. So here, responsibility to protect is for viable situation. If Saudi Arabia or Iran is going to the war, everybody will come and stop them. Why? Because everybody have a lot of financial vested interests. Here I have nothing to lose or nothing to gain from Ethiopia. That can be one argument. Humans are very selfish. Yes or no? Climate change will be a great equalizer. Yes, I sincerely hope it will be a super success. No? Yes, we are fed up with the life, right? Bloody humans. No? It will be adventurous. Again, as I told you the other day, if you can fire, if you can lit a fire using 2 stones, you'll understand the adventure of life. Now we are having the most comfortable life, right? So if you take 2 stones and strike for 1 hour, even to start a fire, then we will appreciate the value of matchbox. By the way, which one was invented first, matchbox or lighter?
Lighter. It is given in Google.
It is given in Google. Lighter was invented first, then came the matchbox. Very strange to believe, right? But it's a fact. Lighters were invented first.
So the strangeness was gone the moment you asked this question.
Okay. There must be some logic. Mhm. Very quickly, we can summarize these 2 articles. 2 things. First one is NREGA payments. Okay, all of you know NREGA. We have discussed NREGA is the most important scheme for rural areas. NREGA payments have a lot of layers, but the most important thing being both state governments and central governments have responsibility to deliver the goods as soon as possible. But there is a huge delay in the delivery of NREGA goods. Why is it happening? Because of lack of proper data or adding more layers to the data. Data-driven policy making is not a wrong thing. Government wants to know how many SC/ST people are getting benefited from NREGA. They wanted to use a new data set, and the data set has led to the delay in the wages. So what can we do? How can we segregate the data? See, there is a huge demand, right? Either caste census, policy making, reservations, NREGA wages. Everywhere we want this segregated data. We want to know how many SCs are getting benefited, how many STs are getting benefited, what is the subcaste, how many reservations are there. I mean, how many people availed the reservations, how many people are getting benefits under Ayushman Bharat. So like this, more the data, easy for the policy making. So there is a huge demand. This also leads to assertions and consolidations. How? If I come to know that only, let's say, 30% of the entire NREGA wages are going to scheduled caste people, but scheduled caste population is X percentage, then I will know there is a discrimination within the NREGA and I will try to rectify that. So like this, the more the data that is available with the government, the better for policy making. Unfortunately, it should not be done at the user end. It should be done at the receiver side. That means from the government side. As a government, you have other ways to collect who is what. Yes, or you can introduce a whole new card as a public service card. Hypothetically speaking, you can create a card only for the public service purposes. Aadhaar is for UID. Yes or no? Aadhaar is only for identity. It's an identification card. That's all. I cannot add cash to Aadhaar. I cannot add cash to Aadhaar. But let's say National Register of Citizens or a public service card or something can be created where all the details of a particular individual is registered. Caste wise or card wise or religion wise, you can segregate the data. Then if you will automatically know how many people from one particular community are availing a benefit. Yes, so the data sets have to be modified, but the problem is consolidation and vote bank politics. Consolidation and vote bank politics. We cannot add more details to Aadhaar card. I cannot use Aadhaar card for other purposes. I cannot add caste data to Aadhaar, so it has to be segregated. Why do I need all the data? Public policy making. Will I use it only for public policy making?
No.
So I need a data protection bill first. I need a data protection bill first. Then I should collect the data in the regulated fashion, or else politicians will make headache. Yes. So not much value addition, simple, but for a normal person, NREGA wages are livelihood. Delays will have severe ramifications. You will see such questions in ethics case studies. You are the district welfare officer. You came to know that NREGA wages are not being distributed in time. People are going hungry. What will you do? What are the steps to be taken? So such kind of extra questions, extra layers will be added by the ethics paper. and you have to identify the ethical dilemmas. Government will say collect more data. If I collect more data, wages are getting delayed. People will die because of that particular thing. So what do I do? Or they will add some other masala like this. You have collected all the data, but the data went corrupt. Okay, then you have to again recollect the data. It might take some days. The more time you take, the more delays. What will you do? What are the ethical dilemmas in that scenario? Will you lie? Will you tell the truth? You get the bare minimum idea, right? Every time it's about interpretation, how you think the story, right? Next, strength. Yes.
So the payments were delayed also because the allocation of funds were very less.
Allocation of funds was less because they've chosen other different data sets, isn't it, sir?
No. The government did not have money. That is also a fact.
Actually, that article mentions that 34% was there is a reduction in 34% compared to last year. Then while you were discussing, I understood in a way that because they've chosen different data sets which accounted for lower people who are utilizing NREGA, that is why they have reduced. This is what I was thinking.
No. It's totally wrong. See, here two things. But one is government has less amount of money for dispersal. Okay. The second one is the state has updated the money. I mean, the state has updated the list to the central government. Central government is not giving the money. State have done their work. The other part is central government has to do its work. Central government is delaying, and there is no accountability mechanism on the central government. That means nobody is saying you haven't distributed. Let's say it's like central government has received the invoice, within 1 week it has to send the money. It is not sending the money. So the problem is with central government because there is lack of funds and other things. So there is lack of accountability on the central government also. Okay. Now, if you think logically, there are two things. One is central government already feels NREGA is a waste of money.
Yes, because there is no asset
creation and all these activities for NREGA. The other thing is you have a moral responsibility. Once you promise it something, whether you like it or you don't like it, you have to keep giving the money. So that's an ethical issue, but also it's a practical issue. My GST revenues are low, or my direct taxation collections are low, or I have other activities. COVID pandemic is a once in a century crisis. I have to spend more money than I thought of. So I can justify that. So that is why I didn't discuss, because center has 10,000 reasons to say why you don't have 10,000 crores. So that's not the moral dilemma here. The moral dilemma is what is the long-term ramification of all this policy thinkings. Two bad things. Next. So this article is again useful in ethics paper. This is more about strengthening the vaccine trust. How do I promote the trust in the people? How do I create a normalcy? How do I create a language of normalcy where people think, getting vaccination is a good thing? Right now, many people are not getting the vaccination. So what kind of terminology or language do I use so that, vaccination is a trusted enterprise? How do civil society activism, individuals, behavioral change, government, awareness, everything come together to promote the acceptance of vaccination? For example, they discuss about this particular program called as Tika Lagwayana, right? So that means, have you got the vaccination? So by asking that program or by creating that slogan or campaigning, people are getting vaccination. You should make them feel like not getting vaccinated is something wrong. That social pressure has to be created. So we can use this in morals and ethics paper also. Yes, peer pressure or societal pressure is a very important or a powerful tool. Yes or no? You don't drink alcohol in the public. Why?
Because they will think otherwise.
It's a social evil. People consider it's a immoral activity. At least that is acting as a deterrence, right? If people if people stop believing that societal opinion doesn't matter to me, then there won't be any morals. Yes or no? So societal pressure is also a very powerful tool, and it can be nudged into behavioral change. If we are successful in this, we can also implement it in other things, like for example TB, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, solid waste, plastic usage. Yes or no? If somebody is carrying plastic bag, he should be made, we should make him feel ashamed. in the long run, after providing alternatives and all those things. So we can reduce the plastic usage. So the same behavioral campaigns can be used in multiple ways. Okay.
IEC billboards.
Again, billboards. Again, this is more about personal pressure. He's talking more about everybody. He's talking about everybody has to come and start play their role, from prime minister all the way till the next door neighbor. Your neighbor should also ask your tika lagwaya na. So what does that do? It creates a moral pressure on you. Arey, everybody is asking, I should also get vaccination. But will that work?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Sure.
To an extent.
Mm-hmm. We have social norms and social culture. Okay.
Because in other countries, they are not one.
But Indians have only one word. What is neighbor? Yes. Okay. Hmm.
Do you have any idea why, or is it like an ignorant random one?
Yes, because Tibetan markets are coming up now. It's the time for them to come.
I think so.
Tibetan markets.
See, normally, what I haven't actually noticed it that I don't go into the city, and the places I have been traveling, I haven't seen this jute. So actually, government has created this subsidy program for women, right? The government is giving a lot of subsidy for women entrepreneurs to create more jute bags. So that might be the reason why jute bags are flooding the market. So we are seeing the benefits of the government schemes. So that can be one thing. I don't think there is any design. I mean, it's not by design. That is what I think. It might be happening because of the market forces. Maybe people are aware on their own that I should move away from plastic bags to jute bags by nature. Some smart industrialists have figured out there is a huge market for this, so he might be flooding the market. I don't exactly know, but these are my speculations. So again, as I have mentioned, the major theme is once you develop that culture of society coming together for a social good, that can be leveraged into multiple places, either for plastic or for other kinds of vaccination. Can we do this for fake news?
We are already doing so.
Sorry? That time also people the truth.
Yes.
So
Reverse is happening.
the reverse is happening. We are discussing all the fake news. Mhm.
Spreading in the family, and if at all I suppose try to counter them, they become very
No, sir. We actually this was a problem in our family group also. Then we did this. What we did was when our 2-3 families meet together, there is always 2 or 3 persons will be forwarding all this.
We removed them.
No, sir. We did, that will be very radical, sir. We started calling them professors, doctors,
Okay.
professors in WhatsApp University, doctors.
Then
Then they were not understanding initially.
Hmm.
Then one of our cousin who felt sorry for, sympathy for them, has sent a big message. What is this? What is this doctor professor called? Then they got the irony, and at least we saw a decrease in WhatsApp forwards. Maybe this can be implemented.
actually is, we would put the original news right next to the message, right? That would stop it from.
Okay, so I will tell one thing. When I was smart, I thought I can change the world. Okay, then I became wise. I exited all family groups. Okay, so I exited literally almost all my family groups. I'm not in any place. And not like that they were forwarding any fake news. I had least tolerance for all these things. Next, facts will never change your mind. There is a wonderful article written by Elizabeth Colbert again in New Yorker. Okay, I think you can download 1 or 2 articles per month, right? Google this particular article called as "Why Facts Don't Change Your Mind" by Elizabeth Colbert in New Yorker. It's a magazine. She has written a fantastic article showing empirical data and science on why human beings hate facts. The first mistake you have done is to try to change their mind using facts. Okay. The moment you say, Prime Minister Modi is not avatar of Lord Krishna, okay, or something like that, they will be offended. Why? The core personality of a human being is my perception. Okay, I have a lot of ego. Okay, and my ego is sensitive. Why it's sensitive? Because underlying deep down, I don't know anything. If I stand in a room of UPSC aspirant and if I open my mouth, I'm never having an insecurity. Why? I know I can blend in perfectly. But if I'm faking like, I'm also a knowledgeable person. I want to show my knowledge in front of everyone. Okay. So my ego is very, very fragile. If someone affects even 1% of it, then automatically I will get anger. Why? Anger is the core human reaction for a self-survival mechanism. He also knows he is not smart enough or he is not understanding what he is saying, but he doesn't want to accept it. His ego is triggered because he knows that he is not in a position to counter your argument. So never ever fight with stupids, right? So as Oscar Wilde has said, don't fight with stupid people. They will drag you to their level and they will beat you with their experience. Okay, so the simplest thing is always counter with a story. Never counter with a fact, counter with a story. So the moment you counter with a story, then they have to create a narration. Then they have to logically justify. Then you can find holes. For example, beating plates will kill the coronavirus. Okay, so then you ask them, okay, next time when you have a cold and headache, I'm going to come and beat a lot of plates. Okay, will you be happy? Right? Always ask a question. Never give an answer. If they say no, this is coronavirus, this dies because of sound, that will die because of cold, won't die because of sound, only COVID will die because of the sound. You will have some entertainment. Yes or no? They are making fools of themselves in front of everyone. Right? So never ever counter facts with facts. People will never love facts. Always remember this. In UPSC, anywhere, very few people in the planet are humble enough to accept that, I can update my knowledge or data with a new fact. Facts don't add new value, they change your existing beliefs. That's a very profound and wisdomatic thought process, right? New facts don't add knowledge, they change your existing perception. That is how we should think. Elizabeth Colbert's article is like groundbreaking. You should read it. You will understand why you should never ever entertain them. And you should always have 2x more knowledge even to entertain the narration, because they don't want to change their personalities. Okay. So facts, lies, damn lies, and stats. I don't remember the article's name, but I think it's
Oscar Wilde's. This one.
Elizabeth Colbert's article.
Oh, the same one. Sir.
Why facts don't change your mind.
I've shared it in group now.
Okay. This one. Yeah, that one only. She's a fantastic writer. So, and you can also read one more book called as Think Again by Adam Grant. Think Again by Adam Grant. If you read these two books, at least you will become a better human being if you apply them. One article and one book. If you apply them, probably at least you won't be that uncle or auntie when you become old. Okay, who will forward messages. See, think of this article also. The same logic applies here also, right? Haryana is giving 75% reservation for people who are employed with less than 30,000 rupees salary. So if you are making 30,000 rupees or less in Haryana, the first preference should be given to local Haryana youth, and 75% of the jobs are reserved for Haryana youth. Why are politicians doing this? Normally, the smart UPSC aspirant assume the minister of Haryana does not have a brain. He is not understanding the implications. He actually understands the implication. That is why he is manipulating it. Yes or no? What does he understand? He understands that he's incapable. He understands that he cannot create more jobs. He understands that there are no jobs. Right? So all these facts are actually understood by the minister. That is why he is vehemently promoting this 75% reservation. The first draft had 50,000 rupees. Okay, local reservation. Now Andhra Pradesh have 75% reservation. Tomorrow Madhya Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, every state will have a 75% reservation for its own youth. What will happen? It's a race to the bottom. It's a zero sum game. Every state will reserve its jobs for its youth. Then there won't be any jobs for migrant labor. Then there won't be any movement of the citizens. People will actually suffer. Okay, but every state will get their own votes, because the Haryana youth will vote in Haryana elections, not the Rajasthan worker or not the Bengali migrant. Yes or no? That is the smartness of the entire thing. But if we assume, this is done with lack of knowledge, then actually we are in the dark. They purely understand what is the actual solution to create more employment, to have land pools, to bring more industries into Haryana. There are a lot of things that you need to do. All these are long-term solutions. They don't have time for long-term solutions and they want votes immediately. If I do a project in Haryana, let's say I am constructing a highway or a quadrilateral or something, 20 years down the line, thousands of employments will be created. But 20 years down the line, I may not be the chief minister. I may not be the minister. I need votes now. Okay, this is an old topic, but this has potential of a mains question. Like local reservations are a race to the bottom. Critically analyze. Yes, so even the threshold is lower. Let's say 50,000 is one thing. Yes or no? Firms with 10 or more employees to reserve 75% of all jobs offering a salary of less than 30,000 for eligible candidates of domicile. Most of the software engineers start with less than 30,000. Most of the startups will also have entry salary of less than 30,000. So you need to find so many software engineers within Haryana. Yes, my sir used to say one thing: the only culture in North India is agriculture. So we need to find a lot of software engineers. Again, Gurgaon, I think Gurgaon and Noida, which comes in Haryana. Gurgaon, right? Noida belongs to Uttar Pradesh. So Gurgaon belongs to Uttar Pradesh. So, sorry, Haryana. So probably Haryana will justify the slashing. But let's imagine what will happen if Andhra Pradesh does the same thing, Telangana does the same thing, Maharashtra, Rajasthan. That is a GS paper 1 concept, regionalism. So everybody will be fighting for their own parochial interest. Collectively, we have to work for national interest rather than parochial interests. Yes or no? Free flow of movement should be there. Only then the country will progress. But if you restrict the migrants, it will hurt the economy badly. This might have a chance of backfiring also. So it is being warned by industries and investors. They are saying, please don't do this thing. It will only hurt the economy. But Haryana government is going ahead anyhow. Why? They don't have time for long-term solutions. They have only time for short-term solutions. If we go there and give them facts, what will the minister do? The minister will be off. Egos hurt. Yes or no? Yes, I hope you understand. Now, one thing I have noticed yesterday in your answers is most of you are understanding the macro topics. If I ask you the theme, most of you are telling the theme of the story, but in specificity, majority of you are lagging. You know what is net zero? What are the reasons for net zero? But what are the solutions part is not good in any single copy. Okay, within the definition of what is net zero also, many of your definition is not good. You don't need to even read NCERTs to write the definition, right? I have showed you multiple times, it's in the newspaper. English reading, graduate, you are eligible to read newspapers and use common sense. Nobody is blocking that part. There is no rule that only after I complete Lakshmikant, Ramesh Singh, Vivek Singh, I will be applying the Newspapers, two different things. Please don't confuse newspapers and common sense with UPSC preparation. Totally two different things. This is part A, UPSC preparation. Part B is common sense and newspaper reading. Whatever you read in the newspaper is for a layman, for a normal human being, part of society. Can you read English? Yes. Are you a graduate? Yes. You should be able to understand what is there in the newspaper. So application of that specificity is missing from your newspapers. You are reading it at a surface level. You know what is net zero? Net zero means some carbon will come, some carbon will go. Yes or no? That is for understanding sake. I simplify it for understanding sake, but for writing sake, you need specificity. You need that fact. Yes or no? It's 500 gigawatts, not 500. What did you write in your answer? You wrote something 500 renewable energy. I will show you your copy. Wait, right? So the thing is 500 gigawatts of solar energy. She wrote 2075. The net zero target in 2070 only, not 75. 5 years bonus because Karnataka BJP is ruling. It doesn't work like that. Yeah, net zero is for entire India. So again, what I noticed is you have this macro understanding, but specificity is missing from most of your answers. So from tomorrow onwards, what you do is while you are reading newspapers, highlight that certain keywords. Okay, or write them down. Or else you are not going to increase your overall specificity. Specificity is very, very important. For example, the moment I ask you why we should, we should not have the 75% reservation, you should be able to bring some points from this particular article alone. Is what will happen when we go for 75,000 reservation. Haryana is implementing 75% reservation for youth with how much salary? 30,000 or less. Okay, what are the ramifications? You need to bring out that particular discussion. We need to reskill, upskill a lot of population. Yes. This is also one more common issue, rising the son of the soil issue. What is son of the soil theory?
Economic nativism, basically
Promoting the nativism. MNS, Maharashtra is very famous. For example, Maharashtra uses the son of the soil theory. Those who are born here, only they should get the job. During Telangana, Andhra separation also, we have seen the son of the soil theory. So son of the soil theory will always promote regionalism. Here, if I take the son of the soil as an Indian, that's one thing. That can also communalize. That people are from different parts of the region, they are migrants and all those things. But if I use the core theory, son of the soil is Indian, then I'm tilling the soil, I'm working here, I'm working hard here. But normally we use the son of the soil in a negative connotation. Yes or no? So all these things have to be noticed. That keywords, see again, each and every paragraph, each and every line, I cannot say this is a keyword here. Son of the soil is a keyword, regionalism is a keyword, balkanization is a keyword, 75% reservation is a keyword. I cannot spoon feed you, right? I assume you are reading the articles on your own, you are doing the bare minimum hard work, then you are coming here to connect all the dots. But yesterday, after seeing your papers, I have realized you are assuming whatever I'm saying, the generic words itself is the discussion. You are not focusing on the keywords. Clear? So that specificity has to be lost. Umang's answer was totally from my explanation. I can literally see my own explanation being reproduced, which is a good thing. Okay, if it has some more keywords, it will enhance the overall answer. Clear? Right? And you need to know your syllabus copy. GS paper 1 regionalism, there is a topic. Regionalism, communalism, all these are mentioned explicitly in your syllabus copy. And again, after clearing prelims, you will be wondering, sir, where do I get the questions for all these areas? It's staring in front of your eyes. No, it's a very common theme. You can also link it to intra-regional development, inter-regional development. Yes or no? Some states are very well off. Some states have natural resources, lands, industries, they are developing. Some states don't have it. So if Haryana being a developed state, let's assume it's a developed state, it is closing its door for migrant laborers. Then what about the least developed states? Where will the youth from those states come to? Where will a Bihari and a Uttar Pradesh fellow work? Yes or no? All these are practical problems. And Indian economy is having green shoots just now. We are reviving just now. If we have all these internal problems, collectively we cannot grow. I hope you understand. So please read the articles and try to underline keywords according to you. Then you will appreciate it more. Your specificity will increase on your own. Yes.
So one more question asked about this topic. Can you also quote about the recent Nobel Prize findings, economic Nobel Prize findings, where they say that migrants actually don't affect the.
See, again, there the question is migrants will increase the wages. The recent economics Nobel Prize, the empirical data shows whenever migrants comes, we assume that wages will increase or wages will fall down. Okay. Here the thing is, I'm not even allowing the migrants. I'm closing down the door for 75% of the migrants, right? 75% of the jobs which are available for all sections of the society or all people now are totally explicitly reserved for Haryana youth alone. What if I'm a startup and I'm not finding the number of youth? Yes or no? Or I have to fill them just for the sake of filling them who are substandard. So I don't think the two are correlated. Probably we can take the experiment here. You can apply the Nobel Prize theory here. Compare it between Punjab and Haryana. This is a natural setting, right? This is a natural setting. The one is youth in Punjab. How are they being affected by the existing policy? How are youth in Haryana being affected after this particular policy? In that sense, the present Nobel Prize you are discussing can be applied. That can be a comparative study.
What about the underdeveloped states? Where will the youth of UP instead of 75%, we reduce it to some percent? Because of migration, is it a possibility that because of migration that UP and Bihar states are not developed? Because that there is no development to youths of UP. And if we reserve some seats in every particular state.
I wish we had such progressive thinking. What you are saying is because every state is having certain amount of reservation, some youth of Haryana and Uttar Pradesh and Bihar are staying back, are forced to stay in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Uttar Pradesh and Bihar then are forced to develop industrialization. If only we had such progressive thinking, this country would have been elsewhere. Slowly they are trying to bring this industrialization and development to Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, but it will take some time. So again, these things should not have a entry barrier, right? Every state should have this competitive federalism. If Haryana is having industries, why can't Uttar Pradesh have? Why can't Bihar have? Or why not Andhra and Telangana have? Like this, there should be a healthy competition. It should not be a forced nudge. It should be a competitive nudge.
Like the regulations from the government can be the same, like instead of 75%, can be down to some percent.
Again, that is what I'm saying. Instead of going in the name, thinking in the name of reservation, think like this. Bihar can have 1,000 acres or 10,000 acres of open land, which has already been land pulled. Current is provided, water is provided. All you have to do is come and set up an industry. Bihar can do such kind of reforms. See, what is the biggest problem to set up an industry? Land. Labor are already there. What is my problem? Land. Government can pull 10,000 acres in Bihar, lay the roads, provide the electricity, water, everything ready. All you need is come and set up a shop. Such kind of incentives can be given. And for 3 years, you don't pay any land rent also. For 3 years, the industries can set up the shop freely. Then what will happen? More industries will move to Bihar. Once after 3 years, they will make certain amount of profits. System is set up. It will take care of itself. Such policy decision should be promoted rather than coercive techniques.
Now you said the land.
Bihar government. It should be done by Bihar
Now,
government.
what if the Bihar government is not very
That's
progressive in this, but the other states
then
are?
Biharis will move out. See again, I understand what you are saying, but it should not be coercive whatsoever. It's a very wrongful tactic, right? And I don't think it will work also. We have We have huge amount of employment where even if you say that the threshold is 25% also, it won't make any dent. Yes, but I understood your logic. I appreciate it, but coercive is not worth your time. Yes. Okay. I will end the session here. We will continue tomorrow.